Well, hello, neighbor. How's it
Pretty
going?
good. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to talk to you, and I'm very excited about your brand new book, Plantcakes.
Thank you so much. Oh, I can't believe it's actually happening. And here, as you know, it's like you work on this thing for so long, and then it's like the countdown. But it's like, oh, it's still like 6 months away, and then all of a sudden,
I
oh,
know.
it's so scary.
It seems like such a far off idea, like you're doing all this work and it's not
Hmm.
real. You're like, oh, I'm just doing this for, I don't know, I'm just doing this. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, 3, 2, 1, it's here. And it's like this
I
real
know. I know.
thing. It's so wild.
Yeah.
And second time in, did it feel a lot different than doing it the first time around? Or were you
I
like,
think,
oh no, I remember
yeah.
this very familiar
I think
feeling?
because I knew what to expect the second time felt just a tiny bit easier, but it was also just a very different type of book. And of course, working with a different publisher and different people. But I loved working with Appetite, like so efficient and knowledgeable and helpful. And, anytime I would have my meltdowns or something, they'd be like, it's okay, you know. And yeah, so the experience overall with the publisher was awesome so far.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've still got
Yeah.
lunch. Um, it's okay. We love you, Robert. We love
Yeah,
you
for
all.
sure. So good.
um, I mean, this is not the author confessional, but it's. I think that when the people go to the bookstore, and there are just so many books,
Yes.
and it's easy to forget that there is a human, and sometimes like a robust team of humans, but there is a human behind that book. Like each recipe, each photograph, particularly for you, you do all of your own. Not only are you doing all the recipe development and all the writing, but you also do all your own beautiful photography. Like there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that sucker.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, doing the styling and photography as well. And I mean it's also kind of fun because I can photograph a project at like midnight, and be like, oh shoot, I have to photograph that one, and then what time is it? And then I can do that. It's nice not to have to work with other people's schedules just so I can slam things out if I need to. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose I didn't think about the flexibility inherent in that. I think I would just get super overwhelmed because that's very much my personality
yeah,
style, but there is you could say, "Oh, I'm just gonna do this. It's going well right now,
yeah.
like at 9 o'clock. Like, let's just make it
Although I
happen."
can definitely see the benefit of having like a 2 weeks where you're just boom, 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 you get it all done as well as opposed to
Yeah.
just piecemeal, but ticking off your list. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much me. I want to ask you because, and I say this time and time again, like I bake stuff, but I don't consider myself like a quote unquote baker. So I find myself very fascinated by people who are quote unquote bakers.
yeah,
But did you like always love baking? Did you bake growing up?
not
Like when
really.
did you actually learn how to do this?
um, Honestly, I started baking uh, around the age like 29, 30. Yeah, so not that long ago. Well, yeah, kind of long ago. Yeah, I know. I made cookies, the occasional cookies growing up. My grandma was an awesome baker, and we would do a few things together. But my mom wasn't like a huge baker. Like I remember chocolate chip cookies coming out once in a while. Um, but yeah, I mean, I remember playing with dough and like making what I thought was a pie when she was making a pie like one time. I remember making like what I thought was soup, just like boiling some water and dumping like all the spices in the spice drawer and then tasting it and being like,
Yeah.
oh God, that's so bad, you know. But I don't know, I always loved the visual and aesthetic of cakes, like any sort of like picture book, or I was always drawn to the cartoony aesthetic of cakes, I think. And actually I spent a lot of time drawing growing up, so I was constantly drawing. But yeah, so I think that's sort of where the connection or fascination with cakes and baking sort of came from, like the aesthetic initially, and then being like, how do you do that? you know? So I think that's kind of where it came from. Yeah.
Well, and I love because not for all people, you were like, oh, let me have a hobby. Let me try and bake cakes. And then this is where it led to,
Yeah.
whereas, some people end up with massive Pinterest fails, but that's not you.
Oh boy, I have so many fails, and I actually still have fails, and I think that's pretty awesome. It makes me human. Like I've sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I have two cookbooks and I just made this. Like, you know, but yeah, so I got a KitchenAid stand mixer for a wedding present. So that was around the age of 29, 30, and that's kind of what kicked the baking interest slash obsession into high gear. Yeah. So I got the Martha Stewart baking handbook. I think my sister gave it to me for like a bridal shower gift. And then I just started reading through it, and I ended up sort of baking my way through that book. And that's how I learned about cakes and frosting and baking pretty much, was that book. And back in those days, the olden days, there was no, it wasn't like prolific YouTube or Instagram. I don't even think there was Instagram. Blogs were just sort of starting to happen. This is like 2007. Um, and so I learned a lot from just books, like, cake books and like the Martha Stewart book. And I remember there was like this decorating book. It was called Peggy Portion Cakes. It's like this British, very sort of fancy, pretty little tea cakes and that type of stuff. So that's kind of how I learned. Yeah.
I know. I feel like we need to put in for the youngins. It's like there was a time when you couldn't just go on YouTube and learn how to do
I
everything
know.
under the sun.
Yeah.
Like cookbooks were our lifeline. They were where we went to learn about a new cuisine or a new style of cooking. And, I think we forget that there's sort of this through line of going to these cookbooks and finding your parents' cookbooks, your grandparents'
Hmm.
cookbooks, and being able to pass that knowledge
Yeah.
down and those recipes down is
I
such a
love
cool
looking at
thing.
old cookbooks, like all the food styling and like the flash photography and all the different like props and stuff, and just imagining the team behind this Thanksgiving spread from like the Best of Bridge or something, like
Oh my
Canadian,
gosh.
down home Canadian moms cooking kind of spreads. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love looking through those old books.
Yeah. For anyone who's not from Canada, Best of Bridge, like every mom and grandma had those books, and they were very much like what you'd bring to like the potluck or like the ladies' card night,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
dips and
Or
the,
the, yeah,
yeah.
Christmas Morning
I remember what
Lifesaver was one that, yeah, that's titles like that as well.
Wife Save
Just awesome.
Wife
Yeah.
Saver is big in the Nielsen. So the Nielsen's, thanks to my mother-in-law, every morning, every Christmas morning is Wife Saver, which we
Yeah.
veganized for me, and then the Shorty's hash browns. So
Oh.
like the hash brown bag with like cream of mushroom soup and sour cream, um, which is harder to veganize. The Wife Saver was very easy to
Yeah.
veganize, but like that is still our Christmas
Oh,
breakfast.
that's awesome. My mom actually still makes the Lifesaver too. Yeah.
I mean, so when did you start blogging then? If you came upon this new passion,
Yeah.
baking cakes, before
Hmm.
we were doing all the things on the
So there was,
Instagram.
I'm pretty sure this platform still exists. It's called Blogger. And I had a blog
Yes.
called cococakecupcakes.blogspot.com. That's the full, I didn't really think too hard about how long that was back then. But yeah, so that was the where you could go to find all my stuff. I just had like a point and shoot camera, and when I started baking, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start documenting some of these wacky cakes and stuff. So that's kind of how I started blogging, was doing that, and then I also really enjoyed the writing aspect of blogging. So I would just write whatever, and then slam up a ugly photo, probably, just a point and shoot photo, and then post it like whenever, 1 p.m., 3 in the morning, six posts in a day, sure, or like once every 3 weeks, very sporadic. But and then as I started getting more interested in my cakes just locally, people would be like, oh, Lyndsay makes cakes. You should see if she'll make you something, And then from there, yeah, like word of mouth. So I would do like family and friends cakes, and then word of mouth mixed with then the blog, and then people started finding me that way. And then I had a few cake designs sort of take off on the internet, go viral as they, you know, that happened in the old days. And it was a very hungry caterpillar cupcakes cake that I had designed for this kid's first birthday. And it got like reposted on like a large design blog. And then I had even more traffic to my blog, and then that sort of eventually translated into like sponsored work, people wanting to like work together with using their product, in some of my posts. And then I upgraded my camera, all these types of things. Yeah. So,
yeah. I think people forget that the early days of blogging were super badass because it was just people like, here is my creativity, here is my passion. People didn't know what it could be because it was the beginning of everything. But then also that I think sponsors are not really thinking about blogs anymore, but that was it. Like before people had big Instagram accounts, brands would partner with you on your blog post to actually sponsor them and make money that
totally.
way.
Yeah. I didn't even edit my photos, I didn't any of that stuff. So it's quite funny to look back at some of my old posts, which I should probably share, be like, do like a little Insta post or something about some of my old, very ugly cakes. Because it's kind of nice to see where someone came from, I love seeing that when people do that.
Yeah. I do too, because I think there's so much I think there's so much emphasis placed on everything just being perfect and exactly the right aesthetic, and forgetting that people actually have to learn their craft. And that's a normal part of the evolution of someone's skill and someone's talent. And yeah, I do kind of like TikTok and the emergence of TikTok now, because things don't have to be so perfect and curated
Yeah.
all the time. And I really appreciate that there's more of a like, this is a little bit more like how it is reality. Everything isn't always gorgeous and like perfectly lit,
Yeah.
bright white
I know. I feel like it
bliss.
went from crappy, or like throwing crappy stuff up is fine, to you have to be perfectly curated, to now it's coming back down to, nah, we want to see all the crap, we want to see real life.
Yeah.
We're tired of the, perfect aesthetic. So
Yeah. And I think tired of thinking that everyone else is quote unquote living this perfect life except for you, because if you do that math, you're like, no, we're all like
yeah.
that, thinking, oh, the internet is somehow better than the real life we're living. Yeah. So, before this detour into blogging that passion turned into a full-time thing, I saw someone call you a feminist craftivist. And I know that you were an art school kid, and I was like, that is maybe one of the coolest things to call anyone
Oh,
ever. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up? What were you doing before cakes and blogging came into
like
your
when I
life?
was like an actual child, or
Whatever if you're
yeah.
like, I still don't think I'm grown up now,
I,
choose your era.
yeah, I don't know. And, as of even now, I'm always thinking of, what am I going to do next? Or what am I going to pivot to? Am I going to keep doing food, or am I going to try something else? So, I mean, even in my 40s, I'm still wondering, or always learning or thinking about what could be next, When I was a kid, like elementary school age, I wanted to be a writer, like a novelist, and then in university days, I was interested in film and filmmaking and movies. Actually, I've always been obsessed with movies since I was a kid as well. Like I would, pour through just the newspaper and read reviews, and be so fascinated with just like the movie poster covers that were like in the in the newspaper. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, I'd have two very different degrees. I have a degree in gender studies, with a minor in film studies, but more like sort of critical theory type stuff. And then I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, at Emily Carr. So I did integrated media, which was like video art and experimental film and some music and um, installation and photography. um, so I have those two wacky degrees, and now I'm a baker. So, I mean, I don't know. I never really was quite sure. Like this whole cake career thing is certainly the longest I've ever done one thing. And it's neat. It keeps opening up doors in different ways, and you meet people, and then they invite you to do something else, or yeah. So I don't know. There's lots of neat opportunities through the years that has come from this sudden, interest in becoming a baker or learning how to make cakes, and yeah, just kind of seeing it through, or just being obsessed with getting better and better, and then all these things sort of happening around it. So yeah, I feel pretty lucky to have followed
But I
that,
also,
or and gotten opportunities through that.
but I also feel like that's something that I'm so drawn to in others, and certainly I know that's one of the things that draws me to you is that this idea that nothing is ever set, nothing is ever
Hmm.
settled, that no matter where you are in your life, there's a future there.
Yeah.
There are new
Uh-huh.
possibilities. Like you don't have to just put your head down and keep doing the same thing because that's what you've always done. Like I really love that sense of curiosity and openness in people. And I think particularly, like we're both in our 40s, and I think particularly at this age, you start to see the people who still foster that and the people who don't.
Hmm.
And I think it's a real gift to be like, you know what, I love this and I'm following my passion. And that looks cute. That looks shiny. Like, let's go there. Like, let's see
Yeah.
what happens there.
Yeah.
If it works, great. And if it doesn't.
Yeah. I think, with what comes with age too, and just life experience, as you get older, so much happens, whether it's losing someone, or heartbreak, or just anything, highs and lows of life. And it just, at this age, I just feel like I can, um, I don't know, I guess reevaluate what's important and in my everyday, and the things that excite me and bring some sense of joy and stuff. Those are the things I'm drawn to and want to move towards, and put my energy into. And because life is very short, and I don't know. I think that's kind of being able to just sort of follow what brings you some happiness is, yeah, that's kind of all I got to say on that. That started off
But
articulate,
I
and then it
think it's a
just
bold,
kind of floated off like a cloud.
as it
Yeah.
does, right? I don't know about you, but I definitely feel that my mind at this age is very prone to exactly that. You're like, there was a thought there,
Yeah. Oh, bye,
and it's
thought.
off into the ether.
Yeah.
Bye. Enjoy your life.
Yeah.
You're no longer with me.
Yeah. I feel like the things that
And
are
I
exciting, and like things that keep you learning, yeah, is that those are things that I'm drawn to. Whether it's like learning new music,
yeah,
or performing, or putting on shows, or even making a poster for a show, or yeah, or taking a class or something. Those are the things that just keep you excited about life.
yeah. Well, because life is for the living. And I think it's very easy, at least for me, to forget that because I have this very immigrant mentality passed down to me by my parents of you put your head down, you just work, 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 work. And like, at the end is when you like, okay,
Yeah.
but it doesn't fit because then you say, oh, there are all those years that have just like passed me by. And where were the laughs with friends, and where were the beautiful sunsets, and where was me, yeah, in a pottery class totally messing this up but also having a blast doing
Yeah.
it.
Aw. I mean, you have such a neat career too that I find inspiring as well. You've done the TV thing, this podcast, the cookbooks, and the dietitian, and your Instagram following, and I always glean some new information from your posts.
Oh,
I'm always learning. I'm like, oh, it's great. Honestly, yeah.
join my nerd zone. Well, I want to talk a little bit about something that is really unmistakable in your work, particularly for me, because I feel, again, like I have no skill set here. And you with such a strong art and aesthetic background, like that's very clearly made its way into your creations. And baking is one thing, but decorating is a whole other beast. Like, how long did it actually take you to figure that? Sans YouTube, like, how did you go about this? How did you figure it out?
I think once I realized the tools, or I realized how to utilize the tools of cake decorating, then I simply I draw something and then I just translate it onto a cake. Like all my cakes start off as like scribbles or drawings or in a sketchbook, or and then I keep drawing it so it's like maximum cute or whatever. And then sometimes it doesn't always look exactly like the initial drawing, but that's sort of where the creative problem solving and the troubleshooting comes in. I'm like moving eyes around, or maybe, yeah, something doesn't look as I imagined. So then you just kind of have to like creative problem solver, think of, okay, so this does not look great. How am I going to make it look better? But yeah, so I think after learning how to use the tools and then just translating the illustrative part onto the cakes is kind of how I I do it. But also, I mean, I love to tell people some just simple tips and tricks to make your cakes look fancier or more put together. And honestly, nature's bounty, like berries and like mint leaves or sage leaves, or edible flowers, all these things that are colorful and bright and already have these great design shapes from nature, they look amazing on a cake, so I love to encourage people to decorate that way if they're feeling paranoid about piping bags. There's a t-shirt, paranoid about piping bags.
I feel like you could make that t-shirt. You have, again, you and your merch are legendary. So,
I do
okay,
love
but these are
making
the tips I
merch.
need. These are the tips. Because I find that I have an aesthetic awareness, but not the physical skill in creating things that are aesthetic. So I do have a piping bag, and I can do, I can do a basic, like I can top a
Oh
cupcake,
yeah.
we can make it sort of
Yeah.
swirly. That's about it. But I love the idea of, well, like a tiny little bunch of grapes
Yeah.
or some flowers from
Mm-hmm.
the garden. I'm like, oh, those are already
Yeah.
perfect. I can't mess
In the
that.
center of a cupcake, a raspberry. And then it suddenly looks finished. And it looks cute like a little cartoon.
Right?
Yeah. Or sprinkles, That's always just dump it, just cover it in sprinkles if you've made like a complete bomb. That always helps.
I have also learned to lean heavily into
Mm-hmm.
sprinkles. Yeah. Okay. Sprinkles, fruit, flour.
Yes.
Those are definitely my things. What about icing a cake? So you do these beautiful, really textured things, but I've also seen like these more sort of like naked, that's called a crumb coat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I feel
Yeah.
like that's maybe a good beginner way to ice a
Oh,
cake,
yeah.
right? Like, how do you do just those like cute naked crumb coats?
Yeah. So a naked cake. So you would just stack a cake as you put the layer on, you put the frosting on, then you stack it up, and then you put sort of a initial coat of frosting on it, and then you use a cake bench scraper and you kind of just scrape around it to reveal sort of
Okay.
those bands of frosting between the layers. And then you can do that, and then I would probably just add a bit more frosting on the top, and then add some fruit and flowers, or you could do some piping, or slam some sprinkles down there. Yeah,
Sprinkle. Shower
yeah,
those
yeah.
sprinkles. Like it's New Year's
Yes.
Eve. That's me. Okay. Okay. So I feel like we can, in the show notes, do a little list of like
Oh, sure.
basics.
Yeah.
So, like a bench scraper.
Yeah.
And I do have an offset spatula. That made me
Mm-hmm.
feel really
Those
fancy
are
and like
great.
a baker.
Yeah,
I was like,
because
okay.
you're touching the frosting, but you're not like jamming down on the cake surface itself. So you're just kind of swooping the frosting on top. One thing that I'm really excited about with plant cakes is, so in the very first vegan cake I ever made. So when I first started dating my husband, Rich, well, when he was just my boyfriend, so 20 years ago, he was vegan, and I didn't. I mean, this is many years ago. Like, there's not the sort of that vegan like explosion of delicious products and availability like there is now. I mean, my husband refers to those as the dark days of going out to find something to eat that was vegan. So the very first vegan cake I made was from this book, How It All Began. Do you know that book? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
Classic.
that was also my first discovery of what veganism was, because my roommate back in like 20 odd years ago, their partner was vegan and had this cookbook. And I was like, what is this? You know, this like cute, kitschy 50s retro themed book. And that's sort of how I learned about what veganism was, and the way that they approached it. Like it was very encouraging, you know, and non-judgmental. And that's kind of how I want Plantcakes to feel, the book as well. But what I was getting at was back when I made that first vegan cake for my husband, or for my boyfriend then, I it was just the cake itself, the recipe, but then I just got some frosting from like Super Value or something, you know, just a grocery store, like no name brand frosting, because it was like edible oil product. I know this is vegan, you know, like there's no dairy in it. Yeah,
Accidentally
exactly.
vegan.
And then as I was veganizing recipes onward, I would just do like a sort of the classic simple buttercream, which would be like the plant-based butter with icing sugar and flavorings. But it wasn't until I discovered, I mean, I didn't personally discover this myself. I wasn't the inventor, but aquafaba. So that's like the chickpea liquid,
Mm.
the leftover liquid from a can of chickpeas, that you could whip that into a meringue. If you could whip that into a meringue, then you can make Swiss meringue buttercream. And that sort of really cracked open all the recipes and the ideas for plant cakes, because it I love like a classic simple buttercream, like the butter with the icing sugar, but to have the Swiss meringue buttercream in your arsenal as well as a vegan baker, you know, there's just more options. It can just make a cake feel more elevated. It's really nice to work with and pipe. And I think that's just a really exciting avenue for plant-based cakes, is the Swiss meringue buttercream.
Well, and I love how in your book you go through like these are I honestly didn't know there were different types of buttercream, and so you sort of go
Yeah.
into it, and also like how you make each one. We need to talk plant-based butter for buttercream though,
Yes.
because in my very novice, unlock novice level baking, I have played around because I have a butter that I prefer for nutrition. It's called Melt,
Oh,
and I have
yes.
discovered that it is a
It's just like its name.
disaster for most
Very melty.
baking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. So good on them for
Yeah.
very accurate
Yes.
advertising, because I love the blend of
Mm-hmm.
oils in it for
Yeah.
nutrition and just putting on toast, but it makes everything just
Yeah.
blah.
So I mean, I always recommend like a brick butter, so unsalted brick butter. I use Becel actually, so unsalted Becel brick.
Mhm.
So Becel also sells the baking sticks, which has the same ingredients, but the makeup of the ingredients are slightly different percentages. So so I've tried using that for my buttercream as well, but ideally I just love to use the brick one. And I would just say go out
Okay.
wherever you are, go out and experiment with the plant-based butters available to you, because sometimes local chains or stores have their own brands. For instance, President's Choice has the plant-based butter as well, which
Mhm.
I like to use in the cakes and the baking part, but again, for the buttercream itself, you kind of just need to experiment to see which one works best for you. So I would say a butter that really acts like a pound of butter, if you leave it out on the counter and it's still in its shape and not like a melted mess, like an hour later, then that will be okay for you. But if it's quite melted, then you might be crying. Ah, I got so many like tears in the kitchen, being like, no, my buttercream has done this or my buttercream has done that. But um, yeah, so that's my recommendation for plant-based butter.
Well, that tip is so helpful, particularly because there are so many different
Hmm.
plant-based butters available in different markets. A great example is where I shop locally. I shop at Donald's, and they don't carry the Becel, so I use the Earth Balance buttery sticks, and I find that they
Hmm.
work really well. I don't love their
Yeah,
flavor as much for frosting, but like in baking, they're
totally.
awesome. So if whatever your local plant-based butter is, if it doesn't melt into a pool, and it's not August at
Yes.
noon in the sun, like in the
Yeah.
window, but like if it doesn't melt into a pool in an hour, you're
Yeah.
probably okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a
And
hot
also
tip.
don't use the margarine or like the butter product that's in a tub because that has more water content. So you want to go for the brick. Go for the brick.
Okay. Go for the brick.
Yes.
That's the quote. That's the quote of the episode. Well, and I want to talk a little bit about, and maybe it was Rich's inspiration, but your first book is like dairy, eggs, all that kind of things, but plant-based is fully
Yes.
plant cakes is fully
Yeah.
plant-based. So was it just you're like, this is how I'm eating now, I want to try this shift? Like what prompted you to go like
So
fully
actually,
plant-based
Cocoa
from the
Cake
books?
Land, my very first book, which came out in 2018. So it's mostly like a cake decorating book, but there is some base recipes in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So there is my favorite vegan chocolate cake recipe is in there too. And I think it was a bit of a wild card. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna put a vegan recipe in there?" But I was like, "Yes," because I mean, I have so many friends and um, that are plant based or vegetarian. Most of all of them are. But so I've been veganizing cakes and food for years, like years and years. Um, and so I wanted to include that vegan cake, and there's a vegan chocolate ganache frosting in my first book. So I think been, I've always been conscious of other people's eating styles, and I think it comes from when I first became vegetarian at like 18, at university, joining Greenpeace, and then all of a sudden you come home from college and you're like, oh, you're a vegetarian now? And then my grandma being like, what? You don't eat chicken? Like my Chinese grandma, what? You don't eat chicken? But and then just then going out for dinner or like going to like a Chinese restaurant and then like 10 dishes go by and then the last dish is like, oh, the vegetarian chow main's here, like, but for me, I love hosting and having parties and stuff too. So I just like to make sure everyone is included and also everybody has delicious things to eat, and it's not like this, like, okay, we're bringing out the tofu cupcake for you or something, and everyone else is eating like this fancy cake, So I think it was sort of like a goal of mine to be like, can I translate all of my recipes and the visual aesthetic of the cakes that I make into plant-based? And yeah, that has been a really awesome and fun challenge. And again, it's also the way I've been eating as well, like through the past few years. I think many people that I know are moving towards being more plant forward or even plant based altogether. So, I mean, we mostly eat vegetarian at home, and I love experimenting with, as I said, plantifying or veganizing recipes. So, yeah, that's kind of where the idea came from. Yeah.
Well, and I love that a book like this shows people, hey, vegan looks like this too. It looks like a really delicious celebratory
Yeah.
cake and not just tofu and tempeh and
Yeah.
lentils, and which obviously I
Hmm.
love to the ends of
Yes, I
this
love all that
earth,
stuff too.
but I think people need to be
Yeah.
surprised, because they do have this conception of like what it means to be fully plant-based or
Hmm.
vegan. And I think for a lot of omnivores, they're like, that means not fun. And
Yes,
you're like,
I
no, no,
know
no, also
exactly.
fun.
So,
Very, very fun.
yeah, yeah, that's the point of the book. It's like, it's fancy and everyday vegan cakes for everyone. So it's you bring this cake to a party and no one's feeling left out, and um, or the book is also for people who might have plant-based people in their life. So I call it plant lovers. So people who are completely vegan and they get this beautiful cookbook, they can make everything, and or you've got like the plant curious or plant forward people who tend to eat that way anyways, and they're like, oh, I'd like to try making or eating more plant based or making one of these cakes. And then you've got like someone like my grandma who, they'd be like, oh yeah, my granddaughter's vegan now, or oh, my sister's vegan, and I want to be able to make them something delicious and beautiful. So that was kind of the idea around the book, was that, you know, it's a delicious cake and it's also vegan, or it's a delicious cake that happens to be vegan. Yeah.
Well, and that if you bring it to the party, you can say
And that's
nothing.
exactly
Like
what I
no
do.
one will be like, "Oh, this quote unquote tastes
Yeah.
vegan,"
So
right?
my whole
You just
family, yeah,
say
my whole family
nothing.
has been my guinea pigs for the last like year and a half because I obviously make all the cakes for birthdays and celebrations. So I'll bring this cake that's, really fun looking. And then everyone's eating it and they're like, "Oh yeah, so good, Lyndsay." And then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, "That was vegan." And they're like, "What?" But now they know that it's going to be vegan. Like, but the thing is, yeah, even my husband and my son, they prefer the plant-based cakes. And I do too, actually. They're lighter in flavor as well and not feeling quite as heavy and you can still get the same delicious aspects of a cake, like for me, infusing layers with like syrups or like a milk soak, or I love adding texture to cakes. So whether it's like a toffee bits crunched up into the middle layer, I love adding jam for like a tangy aspect. um, I have like a black sesame cake, which has like a black sesame brittle on top, and it has the brittle inside the cake. So just all these little yummy surprises, tangy surprise, texture surprise, creamy surprise, you know. So and then all these elements can be sort of swapped as well and used separately or together. You can sprinkle brittle onto ice cream, or you can put the oatmeal crumble into your yogurt. So it's really jam packed with some tasty things, I think. Yeah.
It is because I mean, I got a sneak peek of the book and I immediately cracked it open and started
Oh,
using it. And one of the things that I appreciate about your cakes so much is that I've had a lot of really beautiful cakes that taste of
yeah.
nothing. And you are so
Mm-hmm.
flavorful. You do think
Mm-hmm.
about flavors and textures. So it's not just that your cakes are beautiful, which is
Yeah.
lovely, but then you bite into them and they taste
Yeah.
beautiful. Like you're like,
So
oh yes, this is how I thought this would
every cake I
taste.
wanted to have
Yes.
some sort of aspect, whether it was like a juicy, tangy aspect, or some sort of soak, or a simple syrup or a lemon syrup, or a textural element. So that was kind of my excitement of the book too. Yeah.
And and when you say it's for everyone too, I also really appreciate that for the people like me who might think, oh, like a 4-layer cake with like the very fancy, you have everything. So tell us about there's a
Yeah,
range of
so
cakes
there's
in the book.
snacking cakes, and even some of the snacking cakes you could totally decorate fancy, or utilize the fruit and flowers trick. There's sheet cakes. There's even some cupcakes. Yeah, so it goes all the way up to 2-layer cakes and then 3-layer cakes. So it goes from everyday casual, just having a little hankering on a Wednesday afternoon, to I'm going to make a very special cake for my partner's 40th birthday, or my daughter's 16th birthday. So yeah.
I love that. Now, are you also going to write a song in honor of the new book? Because in addition to being a super cool baker and feminist craftivist and all around awesome neighborhood mom, you are also in not just one, but 2 bands. Tell us.
Yeah, so well, before the cake and baking thing, all throughout my 20s, while I was doing like art school, I also was playing music and touring in various bands. So I was I guess a touring musician for a while. Um, yeah, so we toured across Canada and across North America, did like a European tour even, and yeah, so for a while there I was like, am I a musician now? But and then yeah, I got married and just decided I was like, sold all my musical gear. Like I was like, I'm switching now, and then just got obsessed with baking. But so a couple years ago, I my neighbor and a mom that's like a good friend, and her daughter and my son are buddies. So they were looking for a bass player, and I was like, they were like, she was like, Lyndsay, you should come play bass, and I was like, huh. And then I was like, maybe I will, and so I decided to go and hang out and like play a couple songs with them, and then it was like so fun. And I just remembered that joy and excitement of being in a room with your friends and playing music, and like just this like synthesis of pure comedy, loud music, and just like, the energy of just playing a song, So ever since then, I've just gotten back to being obsessed with music and playing in bands again. And then I started another band fairly recently, I guess, and we've just played a couple shows as well. So, and I just started another band. It's a Cure cover band. Yeah,
A
but this is just like
third.
a
Oh
one-off,
my.
like
Okay.
crazy, just fun thing that a friend and I have been talking about just for years. Is almost a bit of a joke, but then we're like, let's just do it. So, yeah,
East Van Cure cover supergroup.
kind of, yeah. So, yeah, again, it goes back to what brings me excitement and gets my brain going again and brings me some joy. And yeah, music right now is definitely that thing. Yeah. So I feel pretty lucky I get to do that.
I love that so much. And let every single person listening to this ask themselves that question. Oh, what would bring me some joy right
Yeah.
now? Just go after it and do
Well,
it.
a quick aside too is I started playing soccer a couple of years ago. I'd never played soccer growing up or anything. And there's like this awesome local women's league, and it's like mostly women in their 30s and 40s and beyond. There's some like 50s and 60s, and it's been so fun. Like that has become a little bit of my obsession too. It's like getting better at playing soccer because it's like fitness and friendship, You get to go hang out and like play soccer, and that's been a lot of fun too. So yeah, even finding something simple like that, like all you need is a ball and some friends, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so cool. I think I do, like I said earlier, I think it's all too easy for us to just put our heads down and like get through it and forget that life is meant to be lived. Like we are meant to extract at least a little bit of joy out of even the most garbage day. You're like, oh, well, at least I can eat a piece of cake and that makes me happy.
yeah.
Okay. I feel like this is the perfect time to switch into the rapid fire questions. We end every episode with rapid fire
Okay.
questions, nice little softballs that sometimes make you think. First one, best thing about living in East Vancouver.
All my friends live here, so that's probably it.
It's pretty damn good. Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Wild card answer, vanilla. Vanilla, I know
That
it
is a wild
seems
card.
when I was a kid, it's like, what, vanilla? Oh, you're so like boring. But I really love like a nice, like speckled with vanilla bean, like vanilla ice cream, or like a cake, or a vanilla bean Swiss meringue frosting, and you see the little specks of vanilla, and it's just that nice aroma and flavor.
Beautiful. The thing that surprised you most about being a mom?
Hmm. I think how much fun it is, you know? Like it's also it's very hard in many ways. At every stage, there's difficulties, but there's like the joy and the just the pure comedy outweighs when it's tough. Like Teddy's at a pretty
Yeah.
fun age right now. He's 11, so we can go see movies that we both want to see, or we can listen to music that we both like. It's not like yeah, yeah, baby type of music. Now it's like, oh, he likes Metallica, or we can both listen to Judas Priest and be stoked, and like, so I think, yeah, the fun aspect has pleasantly surprised me. Yeah, I think, yeah,
That's beautiful.
I feel like being a parent, of course, there's these roles, but that you're meant to and expected to do, which is obviously trying to raise a good human. But yeah, the part about it being pretty fun was a nice surprise.
Mm, I love that. Okay. Who is inspiring you right now?
Um, well, we both know her. Her name is Erin, Erin Ireland,
Oh, Erin.
she's actually inspired a lot of, and you, has inspired my sort of that journey towards the plant forward eating and thinking, I love to live for bakery and just that same idea of, oh, wow, everything in here is so delicious. And then it's like, surprise, it's also plant-based. So like not having to have like this outrageous political agenda attached, but having the lifestyle and just the ideas and passion behind it, but doing it in a way that is it's more like a community building thing versus a me versus you thing. Because I think, in a lot of times, like I'll be scrolling Instagram and like reading some comments on some vegan influencers' posts and stuff, and it's like, oh, just the vitriol or like the anger, I'm like, it always disheartens me. And I feel like I in a weird little way, I want Plantcakes to be sort of this gentle bridge between different eating styles. So I feel like Erin models that really well, and I've definitely learned a lot from her, and just feel inspired by what she's doing too.
She's pretty awesome. Okay, last one. The recipe you feel like everyone should start with in Plantcakes.
Ooh. Um,
I didn't ask for favorite because I feel like that's not fair. It's like asking you to name a favorite child. So just the one you think is a good warm up to show people what Plantcakes is about.
I mean, any of the snacking cakes area, if you're new to baking, it requires one pan. There's no layering of cakes, and you can just bake it. You can even serve it right in the pan. So I'd say one of the snacking cakes, maybe like I've got like a blueberry streusel cake with like a little crumbly streusel thing on top. That's pretty tasty, like a coffee cake type style. Oh, I will do a little shout out to one of my favorite snacking cakes, which is my grandma, who I call Papa. She's passed away now, but she inspired one of the cakes, which is it's like a simple vanilla snacking cake, and it's got like a really simple but really yummy coffee icing glaze on it. Yeah, and that one we used to fight over that cake when we were kids, and teens, and she would actually make that for me to take back to school after I turned vegetarian. She'd make me like a veggie soup like packed with like kidney beans, and then she'd make this cake, for me. So it's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a good one to start with. Lyndsay, thank you so much for sharing this time with us on the Allsorts podcast. Thank you for your beautiful book. Everyone needs to immediately run out and get it.
Thank you.
Because it will make you so excited. I mean, winter is coming. Bake. Make yourself happy.
Thank you for all your support too, Desiree. It's been awesome.